I'm gonna go over some stuff from Persona 3. Oh, I guess most different Persona games, but mostly Persona 3. You know, Atlas is one of those studios that has a lot of stuff. I'll do a video later on like Digital Devil Saga. They'll come up a few times. I think they integrate a lot of archetypes and symbolism into their video games, and I think it's interesting. And it has really great music. See, this is the thing too. My videos are always kind of like loosely about the game or the movie or whatever that I'm talking about. And I don't know if people hate that or like it, but this channel is never going to be like a game review or a movie review. It's going to be more of an abstraction than that. And I don't like to put too much, maybe it's laziness. I don't think it is. I just don't like to have things overly produced. I like it to be a little off the cuff. My point is, my videos are never going to be like, oh, in 1998, Atlas was formed as a company, and this guy created this game, and the game mechanics are as follows. Like, it's just never gonna be like that. I'm gonna ramble about some shit that's, like, hopefully coherent to you and try to make it applicable to your own life and apply it to what I think's going on in the world today and the trajectory that we're on, perhaps a quasi, like, conspiratorial sense. In regards to Persona 3 Reload is the only one I've ever played and finished. I played Persona 5, I didn't finish it. It was cool, but I liked Persona 3 way more. And even though there's a lot of overlaps across the games, the franchise, in ideas, there's a lot of like overlap in themes and stuff. I think Persona 3 nails it the best, at least for me, because there's like a lot of direct references to life and hope and death and despair, and I think that fits in perfectly thematically with my focus on this channel. So that's why this game was most interesting to me. So this is the final antagonist of the game Persona 3, a mythical representation of Nyx personified, also known as the Night Queen, viewed by some as a Earth mother or Mother Earth goddess. Just a little image, nothing too much to unpack here. The only thing I would say is, in my opinion, so Nyx is like an avatar of death itself, and death is Saturn. And it's interesting because I don't want to get too into it. There's so much overlap in ideas here. I could go on a 10-minute, not even 10-minute, like an hour long tangent about something else. And I'm trying to keep things contained within their own videos. But to me, it makes sense that it's feminine. And when you see it in the game, it's almost like not clearly feminine. It almost looks like a weird hybrid of the two. And I think that's appropriate in the sense that I think Saturn, like the black sun. You know, it's funny. People often think of Saturn as like an old man because he's illustrated as such. And I think that's somewhat accurate, but I've noticed this feminine quality to it. For example, like even in different occult schools of thought, like Kabbalah, Saturn, which has been on the tree of life, is described as you shall call understanding a mother, and it's like it's symbolically feminine. It's not masculine, and that's Saturn. My point is, Saturn, among other things, represents like the world, and you could think of that in like the biblical sense. Like the world is adversarial to the transcendent, to ideals, to truth, and it's more like illusory and temporal instead of eternal, and like sinful in nature. So you have like that kind of thing going on. That's what I think of when I read that. Again, this is from an interview. So what are the shadows after? Even I know the answer to this one. They want to bring back Nyx, except according to you, the shadows already are Nyx. Indeed, they are. So technically speaking, their main goal is to return to Prime Nyx, Nyx as she's meant to be. Having been reduced to small shards of her power, their first recourse is to try fusing with other shards, their fellow shadows. Whenever a certain number of shadows manages to combine, they take a step towards returning to full power as Prime Nyx. Come to think of it, those greater shadows that appeared whenever there was a full moon were created artificially by assembling shadows during Corrijo's experiment. Exactly, they can form without being assembled forcibly. If uncertainty girdles the globe and apocalyptic ideology spreads, greater shadows will appear on their own. Though it may take some time, in turn, those will fuse and eventually bring about Nyx's resurrection. After all, that's the reason they exist. One of the main themes we're going to encounter here, all that really that matters to me was this last part. If uncertainty girdles the world, the globe, and apocalyptic ideology spreads, greater shadows will appear on their own. Which is interesting because, again, this has been years since I've played the game. I think I played this when it came out. I'm talking about Reload. And I guess at some point they were like artificially creating these things, but they're saying they can come up into being on their own. And how that happens is if people in mass start embracing certain values, they start to hold certain ideals in their heart. And I mean ideals in like a negative sense. They start to hold like certain values in their mind and heart, and like apocalyptic ideology spreads, then it leads to the manifestation or the incarnation of that sentiment in their heart. And I think that's an interesting idea, and it could literally be true. You know, if you take my worldview to its most like literal interpretation, and you don't think of things as personifications or dramatizations, and you think of these things as like actual life forms or entities, like I do view that as like kind of real and kind of possible. But if you don't really want to go that far, and that's obviously unprovable, I can't prove that, but if you want to be more secular about it, you could think of it as like a spirit of anger, an idea of anger, a value of violence can't exist until like you or me or mankind embraces it and value holds on to it and carries it out. So then like violence becomes like born into the world. And sometimes I think about that as like these things are real, they're life forms. And, you know, there's old things where scientists used to think that they were communicating with something, right? They were getting an idea, wasn't really their idea, like something was communicating with them. And that's an interesting idea if true, because you start to think about the path that we're on and the things that we're making and AI and different technologies. It's like if all that stuff was really something, like someone influencing us to create it, then we're really like doing its bidding. And I think the end game of that is so it can finally exist and cross the veil, so to speak. And I know that's in this game too. There's like a barrier that kind of separates the archetypal, symbolic, and psychological from this more literal realm where these things exist from coming through. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, honestly, but it's okay. When you only have hundreds or thousands of people praying for the end, Nyx's seal will just be partially weakened. After all, it's not often you get a huge number of people all wishing for death. Moreover, humans have created a conceptual apparatus within their unconscious that opposes Nyx, and with it have fortified their own psyches. This is complex stuff. In a word, that apparatus is mythology. Most times it depicts a beneficent deity vanquishing an evil one and saving the world from ruin. The existence of these deities has helped stabilize our unconscious repression and strengthen the seal on Nyx. However, in our modern age, with all its scientific and technological advances, its impact has diminished quite the opposite. Its impact has diminished quite the opposite. Religion now sometimes drives people toward apocalyptic ideology, especially in a society with such sophisticated information technology as ours. A fractional trend toward Armageddon, which would otherwise constitute no more than a local phenomenon, can sweep across the globe in the blink of an eye. Okay, I understand. The apocalypse in this game originated from Perijo's experiment. Even without that impetus, it's possible the end wasn't far off. You know, essentially what I just said, like, the existence of these deities has helped stabilize our unconscious repression and strengthen the seal on Nyx. So there's something, the veil, something that keeps the end at bay, and it's kind of like the hope that you hold in your heart. That's what these myths are. It's like the Messiah. Atlas integrates this stuff into the game itself. You know, I said I wasn't going to talk about game mechanics, but in the game, the strongest persona that you can control is named Messiah. It's obviously thematically appropriate that the Messiah is confronting death at the end and preventing the end of the world. And also, like, the song that's playing when you're fighting Nyx is called Burn My Dread, so, which is a really cool song. Again, so it's even like the music is relevant. So, you know, burning your dread, like resisting that kind of, falling into that kind of, and See, in this game, like their death isn't just literal physical death, like as a symbolic thing or as an ideology. You can have a death oriented ideology if you're self destructive, if you're nihilistic, if you're cynical, if you don't value things like trust and love and like uphold the sacred and uphold ideals. Like to me, that's all kind of being death oriented, even if you're not literally wishing, oh, I hope the world ends and everybody dies. That's an interesting point too. Religion sometimes drives people toward apocalyptic ideology. I get that's true. I don't want to. That's like almost political in nature. But Christopher Hitchens. I have some clips of him back in the day, and he's an atheist, and I'm not, but that's fine. He would say things like, if you think about the end times in any given theology, it's usually there's prerequisites for like the end times to start. So they stop seeing the insane religious people don't see that as like a warning. They see that as like a playbook, because the sooner the end times happens, the sooner their Messiah can show up. So in their mind, if we can trigger these end times, create the conditions of the end times, then we can bring on our Messiah. And some people in charge of actual governments do think like that. I know there's some people like that in Israel. I've seen videos of like these rabbis talking to Netanyahu, and they're like, bring on the Messiah, hurry up, bring on the Messiah. Well, if you're like, when there's chaos, a hero shows up. That's the story arc, right? And they want the hero to show up, so we're going to intentionally create strife and chaos and violence and all these things. It's one thing to like love the hero and value the hero and want his arrival, but it's another thing to like facilitate evil or create certain conditions just so he'll show up. Like that's obviously insane. That's not a sane way of acting or thinking. Also, a side note, the word apocalypse definitionally technically just means the unveiling, the revealing, or something like that. So it's a moment where like final judgment happens. All like you guys have to be able to think on like micro and macrocosms. Like certain things are apocalyptic in nature, even if it's not the end of the world. Like you think about the word. That's why I think it's interesting to look at like old definitions of words, like apocalyptic meaning the unveiling or the revealing. Like you could think of that as like a moment where literally the veil drops, like that I was describing earlier, in a very grand kind of insane sense, where like entities are coming through that aren't normally in this dimension. But it's also apocalyptic, like all facades are finally dropped. Imagine you have a moment in your life where you're forced to finally confront all the lies that you've been living and like all the escapism that you've been participating in. Like that's apocalyptic in nature, even if like the entire world isn't ending. I mean, your world might be it might feel like your world is ending. I mean, think about it. Like if your parents died or something, and all of a sudden you're left to fend for yourself, and you got all this stuff going on, and it might feel apocalyptic to you, and you would be confronted with a wave of feelings and such. I don't, and different and new responsibilities and everything. It's just an example. Hope that makes sense. Another point he made is about the technology, which is something I brought up just a moment before we went to this slide. But I was thinking of it more in the, I said, very grand literal sense. For example, there's a video game called Beyond Two Souls, and in the game, Willem Dafoe, his character, his wife and daughter die in a car accident. He becomes so racked with grief and despair and like a death mindset that he uses what's essentially a Large Hadron Collider. It's not named that, but it's like the same piece of a technology that they have at CERN, which we could talk about CERN at some point. And in the game, they call that piece of technology the Black Sun, which is obviously, which to me is Saturn, which is death. And that's obviously thematically appropriate. And what it does is it breaks the veil so he can like try and get his daughter and wife back. And that's a form of like technology. I mean, that's like probably the most extreme. That's probably the most extreme example of technology being used in this sense. You think about how social media is now a sentiment of like fear or anxiety or death or whatever can be conveyed across the globe instantaneously and spread in mass. And it definitely allows for these kinds of feelings to sweep people much quicker. Again, so to summarize, that an important thing off here that I'm sure I talked about was like, yeah, we came up with these myths, which is like a savior, which again, it's so symbolic. I don't know. I believe in this stuff kind of literally more and more every day, but to me, it's so symbolically true. It's so thematically true. It's so true in my own life and in my own mind, that if it is these mythologies and stuff, if they're all personifications or dramatizations of technically not literally real things, they're almost so symbolically true that they are just true, and almost so symbolically real that they are just real. So it almost becomes like a not really a meaningful distinction to make to me. I guess I would still like to know if there was like literal demons or something. But again, it's like so symbolically true that it's almost irrelevant to me. I hope that makes sense. What exactly was the fall Nyx was supposed to bring about? As I said before, Nyx's spiritual form has been sealed away in our unconscious. Liberation from that bondage would mean her freedom. She would reunite with the moon, her flesh. Again, guys, there's so many things that I'm not really like smart enough to put into words sometimes, and at least not in a coherent way. And there's so many connections that I've made. I've been looking at this stuff for 10 years. And the only way I can hope to get you guys to understand what I'm trying to put out there is if you watch more of my videos. And I'm not just saying that to like, oh, I want you to watch more of my shit. It's just like I have so many examples. And when I see something like that, I think of like 20 different things that I don't have queued up, and it kind of veers off in a totally different direction. But it's not an accident that the moon is her flesh or whatever. Think Naruto, where the infinite Tsukiyomi, Madara's plan is to. It's not, and that's the thing. It's not even Madara's plan. So if you've never watched Naruto, there's a villain. His plan is people are so irredeemable. Again, this is a death mindset without it literally being about killing everyone. Things are so irredeemable. The cycle's unbreakable. The only way to create peace and stop the suffering is if I inject everyone into an illusion. And it's called the infinite Tsukiyomi, or like infinite dream. It's their version of like the Matrix conceptually. And then you find out later at the end of the show, it's not actually him that's been doing that. He's actually been carrying out something or someone else's will this entire time. And a lot of people didn't like that. They thought Madara was a better final villain, but I thought it was like thematically appropriate. It's like there's always something kind of on the outside that's not really quite human, that's, guiding these things. I think that's accurate, and I think it's appropriate, and I think it's interesting. In order to initiate the infinite Tsukiyomi, the infinite dream, he projects it off the moon. Everyone, and again, the moon has to do with like illusions. It's symbolically feminine, and he's carrying out in Naruto, Kaguya, like mommy. She's like this maternal figure, and in my opinion, we talked about the Earth, Mother Earth goddess and stuff. This whole matriarch kind of thing, totally symbolically relevant, total overlap there. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. I don't want to get too derailed because I'm trying to like keep it a little bit on topic with Persona, even though it's kind of relevant. She would reunite with the moon, her flesh, and regain her true form, ushering in the fall and ensuring Earth's doom. As a matter of fact, this event has come near to transpiring several times throughout Earth's history. Think about when a huge war breaks out or a deadly epidemic starts to spread. Thoughts of end times start taking hold in people's minds. They grow tired of living. They can't stand to do it anymore. Such ideas weaken the force that pins Nyx down. People's fear of death ironically serves to bring Nyx's liberation closer, along with the doom her release would entail. The book of prophecy I mentioned during the game is a chronicle of the apocalypse as it appeared in various eras throughout history. And with the hints it provided, I was able to discover a means by which Nyx could be liberated. Pretty amazing, huh? Again, you have this thing which is super thematically consistent in all the Persona games, this idea that this mass spread ideology is actually creating something. Like our thoughts, our feelings, our actions are obviously creating our own reality, which is definitely true in many cases. Which again, this is the point of this channel. This is really the entire point of this channel, and why I talk about the occult and symbology and all this stuff, other than the fact that I just think it's interesting. I think it's actually the correct perspective to have. Like, I think this is actually where your focus should be, because I think it's where true change, the potential for true change is at. I think it's the bedrock stuff. I think it's the foundational stuff. I think it's more actionable. And I think it places great responsibility and great importance on all the dumb little things all the things that you think are dumb that you do, the things that you say to other people, the things that you say to yourself, the betrayals you do to your you have in your relationships and stuff. Like all this stuff is so thematically grand in nature if you truly understand it, that I think it makes you take it more seriously, even if it's not. Which is like my point is that's a useful way of thinking, even if you don't think it's true, because it makes you think what you say and do and believe and all that is of greater consequence rather than just nothing you do or say or feel or value matters. And I think one that's actually not, I think it's true that it does matter, but I also think it's useful as well. That's an interesting idea that we've been like on the brink a few times. This is an idea that's also expressed. People say archons, right? And from a conspiratorial angle, some people attribute that to like, why does the media, and again, this is that technological angle too, why does the media spread certain stories and stuff? And even from a conspiratorial angle, sometimes it's like, even sometimes when you think you're getting leaks or disclosure about something, or whoa, my worldview's been confirmed, like the Epstein files just got released. It's like sometimes it's probably not that simple. You know what I mean? Like they might be trying to, I don't even think might, they are. I think they want you distracted. I think they want you fearful. I think they want you having anxiety. I think they want you not trusting. I think they like to destroy those kinds of virtues. And the whole Archon thing, again, it might be a personification, or it might be, again, a literal thing, entity, being, demon that exists that is almost those feelings incarnate, or at least it thrives off of those feelings and grows from it, which is, again, what this whole thing is even about. That's because the materials from which Nyx is composed operate under a different set of physical laws than those that govern Earth. Even so, the impact of the collision was violent and immense. The shock broke off a fragment of the Earth, which flew into the sky to become the moon. Nyx's vibrational essence, her spirit, remained with the planet, while her physical essence, the flesh, resided in the moon. But it was her spirit that is more dangerous of the two. You see, the vibrations it emitted were capable of annihilating all life on Earth. Needless to say, Earth's creatures, primeval as they were, cherished life instinctively and managed to resist Nyx's deadly vibrations, and so life persisted. It evolved explosively and in time acquired a weapon with which it could oppose Nyx. The weapon is what psychologists commonly refer to as the collective unconsciousness, the shared informational domain of all life on Earth. But how is that a weapon? Was it some kind of supernatural power they used to beat Nyx down? It's like the very feeling and idea of hope becoming more and more refined over time. And now we're telling stories about it, and we develop entire religions surrounding it and values and belief systems surrounding it. And again, all this stuff could be like, Jesus could literally be real. Like, he could literally be real. I'm not even going to go on that diatribe again. I think you guys get it. No, those living on Earth managed to seal Nyx away in their collective unconscious. The driving force behind her containment was repression, which stemmed from a fear of death and a desire to keep living. One can't deny the irony that it was Nyx, an entity meant to embody death, who spurred Earth's life to evolve such complex mental faculties. In Greek mythology, Nyx is depicted as a goddess perhaps man was aware to. You wound me, I guess, anyway, as long as living things, especially humans with powerful and complex mental faculties, fear death, Nyx should continue to be sealed away in their collective unconsciousness. Of course, we had a very close call with that during the game. Just when Nyx was about to be restored and wreak havoc, she was once again sealed away by the power of the universe your leader obtained. That's another thing. How I talked about, you get the Messiah persona. You don't have to, but you can get the Messiah persona to fight death incarnate at the end. There's another like Christ moment where the character that you play as, the protagonist, he dies. It's a part of like the official lore of the game, canon of the game, where he dies at the end. And he dies by using basically there's a moment, it's like classic anime moment. I think I have a clip of it later, where it's like all the people you met, all the friends you have, they're like saying words of optimism and hope, and you're kind of like becoming the opposite of what Nyx is. You're taking in all these, you beat her with the power of friendship essentially, but it's more beautiful than that, even though it is kind of like silly. It is like a bit of a silly trope, but it is real. It's like you're the opposite of Nyx. You're embodying all these hopes and dreams and optimism and all this stuff of your friends, and there's a moment where you become the seal that seals her away, and you lose your life in the process, which obviously is like referential to Christ's self-sacrifice type moment. That's the only point I was trying to get across. What are shadows? They follow you on sunny days. Not that kind of shadow. Fine. To answer your question seriously, shadows are pieces of Nyx, so they aren't like they aren't like her minions or children. Remember how I explained earlier that Nyx is suppressed in the depths of our collective unconsciousness? What that means is that Nyx exists deep within the psyche of every living thing on a level below the unconscious. So imagine if a certain living thing, Lori for instance, were to say, I got a 0 on the test, what's the point in living anymore? And stopped resisting Nyx in his unconscious. What do you suppose would happen? I guess Nyx would come slithering out of his heart. That's right, more precisely, a piece of Nyx would break free from his unconscious. That piece of Nyx of her spiritual form is in fact what we call a shadow. For something that's a part of Nyx, it sure is runty. That's because it's just a tiny infinitesimal piece of her aside from a few special abilities. Blah 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 blah. So they give like lore to like the common fodder that you fight throughout the game, and it is like applicable. Again, this is my point earlier that I was making about how things that you feel and say and do and the values and principles that you have, you're participating. Those are all factors or contributors in this grand like narrative or game that you're a part of, and they actually have major depth to them and probably major consequence to them. And that is why I put my focus on those things. I think that is where more truth is. I don't care about politics. I don't care about any of that stuff. I think it's inconsequential. It's like Darth Vader. Remember Darth Vader? He's talking to that general guy when they built the Death Star. He's like, the Death Star gets built, and he's like, the fear of the, first of all, Death Star. What is that? It's the Dark Star, the Black Star, the Black Sun. And what does it do? Okay, it's a giant machine that can kill anyone, so they coerce everyone into behaving. And that's kind of that general's rant. He's saying, like, fear of this battle station will keep everyone in line. Our power is absolute. And Vader says, don't be too proud of this technological terror that you've constructed. The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force. And he was on the dark side too. Like, that was still Vader in that moment. He just understood like the real game that's being played. And that's why I've talked about in other videos, like, villains are so concerned with like breaking the hero from like a moral or like principled way. Like, they understand like the battle is a spiritual one. Like, Luke, the Emperor wants to make Luke his apprentice, and like he wants to convert him. He doesn't want to just kill him. The Joker wants to get Batman to kill. He wants to get the people to blow the other ships up. It's all about a philosophical, ideological, spiritual battle, because even the villains realize like where the real game is at. And I think that's not just thematically interesting, I think it's actually true. So that's the end of that little interview segment. This is the intro screen for Persona 3. It says, time waits for no one, all are equal in its flow, all lives born to their ends. You who protect the glimmer of the finite future, you have a single year, go forth and live in the time given to you. Even in these days, halcyon days of repose, let your heart guide you and never stray from the path. I made a video like, I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe longer, on a different YouTube channel called The Young in Heart versus Time. And that's obviously like a common, you have pictures of Jesus like pointing at his heart and stuff, or illustrations rather. That's the thematic rivalry. I just thought it was interesting. There's even that song by Frank Sinatra. It's like, fairy tales can come true. It can happen to you when you're young at heart. So it's like, obviously time and loss brings about feelings of like cynicism and despair and hopelessness and futility and like, what's the point of it all and shit. That's why time and Saturn and death are all like conceptually part of the same archetype. I'm sure you guys understand that. I'm not trying to talk to you like you're stupid, but I'm just trying to be thorough. The end won't be brought about by any one person in particular. It's going to happen because there are many who wish for it, almost as if it was decided from the beginning. So again, that's just we've already talked about that, how the collective people are shaping their thought, their wishes, their will, their feelings are becoming incarnated in the form of Nyx, who's going to bring about the end, right? Which Saturn is the end. There's a reason he's death. Yeah, he represents the end, or she, maybe she, more accurately. Apathy syndrome. I'm sure you've heard of it. We sometimes refer to those who suffer from this as the lost. Apathy means to not care, right? To be apathetic towards the consequence of your own thoughts and feelings and actions, and indifference towards everything. That's obviously a major catalyst for a million things to go wrong. I mean, just stop caring about what you look like or your life or anything that you do and see how quickly everything falls apart. Mark Passio, a guy that I used to listen to, I think he's pretty smart. I haven't listened to him in a long time. I just always quote random people, and I'm not really quoting him, but he would talk about like a holy trinity in a more secular sense, or I guess an unholy trinity. It would be irresponsibility, apathy, and ignorance. So like apathy is like the disabling of the mind, or not the mind, like the heart, like the nullification of the heart, and like not even necessarily just empathy, like I care about what happens to other people, although that is a part of it, more in the other sense that I was describing. Ignorance is like the nullification of like your mind and your knowledge, which is linked to things like your insight, right? Your knowledge. There's a reason that we have terminology for like, I was in the dark about that. Like light and knowledge and all these things are tied together. And KRS-One put me onto this perspective that knowledge and sight are literally, like, technically linked with each other, not just only symbolically or metaphorically, but like literally technically linked to each other. For example, if you are an electrician and you saw some wires and stuff, or you saw a room in a house, you might think about how the outlets and wires are oriented and how they're working together and stuff. Like, you would literally see things differently based on the knowledge of your profession that you have. Like, literally, you would see something different. A mechanic would look at your engine and see things that you do not see because he knows things that you do not know. That's my point about ignorance in regards to stuff like this. Is if you do something like cheat on your girlfriend, or if she cheats on her husband or whatever, like, if you don't have this like symbolic, like, archetype weight behind everything, then those things are wrong, but they're not like catastrophically wrong. Like, you don't see, it's kind of like the Jesus thing. Like, they don't forgive them for they don't know what they do. We don't know what we do. And I don't just mean like, we don't actually know what we're doing is wrong, but it's like we don't understand the depth, the weight, the gravity, the all-encompassing nature of our words, our feelings, our actions, even down to stuff like I said, our feelings. When I say feelings, I mean like stuff that is just completely integral, something that, like, this is why it's good to believe in God, because if you believe in God, conceptually you believe in like an objective truth that is like measuring you, whether or not it can be proved by anybody else. It's like, I could tell a lie, and even if I know I'll never get caught for that lie, ever, I might even benefit from it. Even if I know I'll never get caught, I'll never be exposed for that lie. It's like, if you believe in God, it's kind of like he knows you lied. It could literally be true, and it probably is. But even if it's not, it's useful in some sense to think like that. It's a form of like extreme accountability, and in my opinion, that's like what we need to take on. Because truth and accountability are like inseparable. That's the kind of perspective we need to take on if we're going to ever actually have real change in our personal lives. If you want to actually have a transformed life and a fucking re-steering of the ship for the trajectory that the country's on, that the globe is on, like, all this stuff is not skippable. It's not optional. And then, okay, so I was talking about ignorance, and then irresponsibility is like a nullification of action. So Mark Passio was just talking about how apathy, ignorance, and irresponsibility are kind of like the unholy trinity. Nullification of action, because you can know things without acting on them. Part of what gives your values or principles or beliefs merit is whether or not you act on them. Like, I could say I value my friends, or I love my wife, but if every chance I get to, when I act that out, is, I beat her or steal from her or lie to her or cheat on her or whatever, obviously, like, that's a contradiction. Not only is it a contradiction, but when you think of irresponsibility, you also think of like inaction too, like the things that you don't do that would imply you care about what you say you care about. I don't know. You guys get what I'm saying. Shadow feeds on the mind of its prey. The victim becomes a living corpse. That's an interesting thing too, because when the fall happens, everyone gets put into a coffin. There's tons of death imagery because I mean, in this case, death is literally like the final antagonist. Not even final; it's like the antagonist the whole time. But death incarnate becomes the final antagonist. I mean, to go back real quick, because I didn't even talk about the lost thing, or they become a living corpse. We talk. You think about when people are disoriented in life, and I don't mean like literally like they got spun around in an office chair disoriented. I mean they have like no guiding principle. You think about when they're not living up to their potential. You might say that they're lost. Sometimes when people just become vessels for pleasures and desires and ideologies that were foisted on them by a system, you start to think of them. People say, I don't like to think of people like this because it's kind of harsh, but I understand why. I get the frustration. You start to think of them as not human or an NPC. Oh, that person's an NPC. Or you start to think of them as zombies, the Walking Dead. Like there's something about being possessed by an ideology or not living with intent and all these things, and just becoming a vessel for these things that you're not even necessarily conscious of, that kind of makes you like a walking corpse. I know that's kind of harsh, but it makes you not quite human. This is a little bit of a detour, but this is a screenshot I personally took when I was playing the game. Like, see, this is like me took it off my Xbox or whatever. That's funny, Xbox too, and I'm about to talk about the letter X. And that's why the Xbox is called the Xbox, by the way. 100% bet my life on it. So when Nyx is going to show up in the game, right? You have like a date up here, January 9th. You know when Nyx is going to appear, and you can do stuff in the game to prepare for it. And at one point, when I'm ending the day, you walk into your dorm to like sleep and go get ready for the next day. One of your companions says this to you: only 3 more weeks till X Day. I've been saying that X is symbolically tied to Saturn and death and all these things forever. I've posted about it. I made 2 videos about it on my old channel. I'll make another one, and I think I'll make a strong case for that. That's the only reason I included this screenshot. I just wanted you to like keep that in your mind. And then you see things like, it's just funny how, again, this is about the knowledge thing. How many people that don't think about this, and I'm not saying this in a condescending way, but they don't know. Like, they would just walk in while they're playing the game, this guy would say that to them, and they wouldn't even think twice about why the fuck he just said that. I'm absolutely convinced that X is a Saturn symbol. It's kind of like I said, the Joseph Campbell thing. It's like the hero with 1,000 faces. It's like the villain with 1,000 faces, or the hero with 1,000 masks, or whatever that book title is called. It's kind of what an archetype is. It's just like how I said, there's a lot of ways to think about it. It's like, okay, how many stories can you read or watch? How many movies or books exist? How many of them have a hero and a villain in it? A lot of them. How many are different iterations or different focus points of like the same archetype, which is a hero and a villain? That's what an archetype is. It's like a distillation of ideas and values and philosophies and concepts into a representation in the form of like the hero or the villain of a character. My point is, much like how there's different characters that could be called a villain and they're part of the villain archetype, if you watch a lot of movies, you'll notice that villains say similar things and they believe similar things and they do similar things. Same thing with the hero. And that's not because it's a writing trope, it's because it's based off something true about us. Much like that, there's different characters, there's different symbols that are referencing the same thing or referencing different components to the same overall idea. And X is one of those that applies to Saturn. Hope that makes sense. I'm trying to be as coherent as possible. It's funny because I just went on that rant. So is Joker. So is Clown. A clown is another one. I'll make another video on it. Again, I think I make a pretty, even if I don't understand it in its totality, like, okay, I probably don't know. A lot of these ideas are very weird and abstract. I don't understand it completely, and that's fine. But I think I still make a strong case that it is a reference to what I think it's referencing to. That Joker the clown thing, I think I will be able to convince you that it's what I think it is. Not in this video, in a different one that's more focused on it, but this is from Persona 2, okay? So I never even played this game. Very old. I think it's like PS1. In the present day, the Joker is a mysterious man active in Sumaru City, where rumors are spread that he can answer wishes submitted to him by calling one's own phone number. However, if the person who summons them does not have a wish on their hearts, Joker instead claims the dreams of his victims and reduces them to shadows of their former selves. Joker's victims remain on the spot, soulless and frozen, and they will be erased completely from the cognition of others. He's also the leader of the mass circle in gathering the ideal energy. There are types of energy generated by human psyches. However, the key difference between that word and the two types of energy is the actual generation of the substances. Ideal energy is generated by hopes and dreams, while Kagari is a highly corruptive, potentially toxic substance generated by guilt and despair. Kagari, I don't know, and ideal energy are considered to be polar opposites. Hope and despair, condemnation and redemption, life and death, all these things. Tyranny and freedom. That's what sun and black sun, they're all inversions of each other, but they're like enormous quantities of their of either substance are seemingly able to warp reality according to the controller's wishes. In actuality, concept is likely manifested through rumors, just like any part of whatever blah blah blah. I can't read that name. Doomsday prophecies, and they do not directly influence anything in their progress. So again, it's just that idea that's been in Persona games from the beginning, that your thoughts and feelings are and actions are obviously creating some kind of reality that we're all experiencing. When you feel despair or when you do an act of kindness, you're actually like doing something truly kind of revolutionary in that moment. It's very grand in nature, very all encompassing. Before I get into these video clips, one thing I want to say that I don't have a video of is that it's just another little side note to how they put, like how I said, they integrate the same idea in different examples into the game. Like Burn My Dread is playing when you're fighting the final boss, and you can use the Messiah persona to fight death. And another angle of this, and it's not like they created this, I've seen this before in other works of fiction, where winter, the final battle takes place in winter, and you know the final scene of the game I think is your character dying surrounded by his friends on the rooftop on the first day of spring. So winter as the season, I love winter actually, just because I like the temperature change, but symbolically winter is like, it's cold, it's darkness, there's less daylight available. So it has this thematic association with despair and death, which is when Nyx shows up. And spring is obviously like the return, like the escape from that, like the return of the sun, the return of more daylight, the warmth is coming back. Again, it's just symbolic stuff about seasons. It's not like, and there's some reality to it. Like some people, if you live in a gloomy area, there's like seasonal depression where like if it's cloudy out and stuff. I don't know how real that is and how much it affects people, but people say it's true and it affects them. I could believe it. I also think it's super interesting that I know Thanksgiving is in fall, but it's almost in winter. It's at the tail end of November. And obviously you have Christmas in December. I always thought it was interesting that the most like family oriented holidays are in the like darkest seasonal time, like symbolically. And I think that's kind of like heartwarming and interesting and cool that in the darkest time, symbolically, that's when our most cherished family oriented holidays are at, is like at the end of the year kind of thing. Anyways, that's that little rant because I don't have a clip of him like dying on the school rooftop or whatever, but I remember that scene. When I was playing it on Xbox, you can like record the last minute of gameplay, and I would do that sometimes when I thought like, oh, that was a cool thing. But sometimes you don't know that you're going to want to record it until the conversation kind of develops a little bit. So I like skipped over it a little bit. And he says, this may sound odd, but do you think this country is headed in the right direction?
Odd, but do you think this country is I see. Well, I feel differently. You're an optimistic man, so maybe society looks different through your eyes. Up until January, there was a sinister cult growing in popularity. A society without a future. For many people out there, that's the reality.
I mean, dude, how many people feel like that right now? Things look grim economically. Things look grim geopolitically, like culturally. It seems like there's no justice. It seems like law, and it seems like any remedy to any attempt to correct these things is just like a drop in an ocean. That's what I'm saying. We need something very transformative to happen. but a lot of people feel like they straight up don't have a future. You know, it's borderline like Weimar shit we got going on sometimes with the gambling that's taking place. Like sports betting is like totally advertised out the wazoo constantly. Crypto. I'm not saying like I hate crypto, but like a lot of people have this perspective that their only way to make it in this world nowadays is to like luck out and get some like lottery type win off of like crypto or gambling. That's not like an optimistic view of the future. That doesn't like give you an optimistic view of like a middle class life and being able to have a family. And that's obviously like the backbone of a country. Like we need a form of like prosperity that most people can attain. Otherwise, everything's gonna fucking fall apart. But and then also like the widespread like digital prostitution, like that's the female version of it. How many women are on OnlyFans, man? I'm not trying to like be mean, but like it's a form of prostitution. Sure, it's like slightly better because you're not literally having sex with people. It's just digital prostitution, and that's a form of like lack I mean there's a form of like laziness, I guess, because like it's easier to do that than be creative or work hard or something. It's also like a despair thing, like people feel like they don't have options, the decline of a culture, like there's no stigma or shame, there's no sacredness to anything, all that. Anyways, that's a lot I agree with it. A lot of people feel like this right now, and if anything that we've been talking about has registered, that means if a lot of people are feeling that way, we're almost like creating it. And on some level, from like the conspiratorial angle, is like they want us feeling like that. They probably do want us feeling like that. They probably want us feeling despair and no hope and there's no future and all this stuff.
I was thinking how we could change that, and what it would take to change society. My answer to that used to be reform by those in power. I thought that was the only way. But starting a revolution just because you have the power to do so creates more problems.
I don't mean to keep interrupting him, but that's another thing. Reform by those in power. A lot of people think, again, you're going to vote your way out of this. And you know what? If you want to participate in voting, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you not to vote. My personal opinion from like a conspiratorial angle is that they don't count them. They don't count your vote. I don't think they count them. And that doesn't mean you're powerless to affect change. Quite the contrary. I've just spent an hour talking about how everything you do matters and who you are matters. And it's of grand consequence, especially if you're a religious person who believes in like a literal heaven and hell. Then these things have like eternal implications on your like soul. But even if you don't go that far, it's like we're all participating in some form of like reality creation. And everything you do has grave. Is of massive consequences. Of massive consequence. I'm not saying it doesn't help to have powerful people on your side. I don't know. Maybe this shit sounds hokey. Like, I know, like, Nick Fuentes, for example, I feel like he has the opposite. Well, not really. He doesn't really have the opposite opinion. He does believe in, like, individuals being able to make change. But his thing is, like, we need to get into politics, like, get into power, and then change it from, like, the top down. And that's an interesting, and perhaps could be successful. I'm not shitting on that idea. I'm glad somebody's entertaining that idea and he's trying to do something. But and I don't want to have to give disclaimers every time I say something. I hate that. Like I don't. Oh, before I make my point, let me like preface it with all this shit just in case you might get mad at me. It's like, first of all, I don't think you think like that. But even if you do, it just wastes time because look at me talking right now, and it's like self-policing, and I hate that. And it's something that's so embedded in all of our minds that it's like I was watching a video the other day about a guy talking about Blood Meridian, and he's like, oh, I have an interpretation of Judge Holden, but if you disagree with me, I just want to let you know that's okay. And it's like, I appreciate that he said that. Are there like adults that are watching this shit that don't understand that as like baseline shit? Like you actually have to let people know that they can have a different interpretation of something. Like I have to like remind you of that. I have to put that disclaimer on it. I'm not faulting him for that, but it's so ingrained in our psychology to be like that that I fundamentally disagree with being like that, and I still do it. I know that's like totally irrelevant to what we're talking about, but
that's what the cigarette incident taught me. I realized how naive I had been, and it helped me arrive at a different answer. I think the best thing for society is education. Every last individual that makes up our society should have a right to education of heart and mind. I really believe that's what we need.
A lot of times like left-wing people will say like, oh, we need education, and it comes off as this like hokey thing, and it just means we need to pay teachers more. and it lacks like the heart, like the sentiment lacks like weight for some reason when they talk about it, even though I'm sure a lot of them are like well intentioned. I kind of agree with him here in the sense that education, I just told you how education and knowledge like shape your perception, right? So the more that you know, the more that you see, and it's all tied together, and the more that you see, the more that you like understand and like recognize stuff, and the more that like, and I think like knowledge feeds deeper feelings. So like the more you understand like a virtue or a value and see its application in different areas and understand its depth and all that, like the more emotionally impactful it becomes. That's why like I might literally like cry if I see like there's certain pieces of fiction that are really special to me, and like if you catch me in the right mood, like it'll hit me hard, and even if you don't have a perfect understanding, it still hits people hard. Why do people watch fictional movies and cry when something happens? It's because these ideas are coming at them, even if they don't have like a really cool understanding about it, like a really big understanding of it. It still impacts them in a way that they might not truly be able to consciously understand or articulate, but that doesn't mean it isn't happening. But yeah, education I think is a good approach for sure. I like how he says heart and mind, so we're not just talking about like technical stuff. Like we're talking about heart reformation, which is the Bible talks about both. The renewing of your mind, but also the renewing of your heart, being born again, stuff like that.
The lost are far more numerous, but also more easily saved. They only need one thing to live for, one thing worth protecting, one person to inspire them. The cult are more difficult to help. We can do things to solve these problems. We can live our lives in ways that inspire others. We can contribute to a culture that celebrates the joy of life. We can extend compassion and understanding even to those who might not seem to welcome it. These are all easier said than done, but in essence the core sin that this story points to is that we haven't loved life as much as we should.
Interesting. Yeah. This I remember this is some like video some guy made about Persona 3, and if I clipped this years ago. So if I knew the channel's name, I would be like, "Oh, this is the channel and here's how you could find the video." I mean, I'm just going to let it kind of speak for itself, especially since we've already been talking about these ideas for an hour plus at this point. These are the only clips that I have. There's like one more like this where it's a guy talking about it. I don't want to just react to somebody else's input, but he did a really good job. Sometimes, just as a side note, just to put something positive out there, I complain about like the mediocre. Like sometimes I feel like there's so much mediocrity on the internet, and there is. And it's very like disheartening and frustrating sometimes. There's a lot of junk and spam, especially with like AI and stuff now. It's only going to get worse. There's a lot of like just soulless crap and mediocre stuff. But there's also like a lot of really smart, funny, creative people out here.
The end of life on Earth, and the resurrection of Nick.
I'm not going to harp on it too much.
The Great Seal is
we
necessary
spent a
to
lot of
keep
time
Nyx
talking
in
about
check.
this.
There are two related problems behind this. The first is the lost, people whose passion for life has dwindled into apathy. As long as so many people live lives devoid of meaning, the fall will always be close at hand. The second is the cult, those who actively hate life. They are less numerous than the lost, but they actively work to spread their twisted worldview.
Yeah, see, the cult would be more like if you're a conspiracy-oriented person. So, like, you have, like, the lemming... that's, like, a harsh word. Like, the sheeple or something. You have... let's just say the lost. Let's use their terminology. You have the lost, who are basically victims of a agenda. And some of it's, like, a natural part of life. Like, people die. Like, that's a real thing. They didn't create death itself. These, like, creeps, like the New World Order, Illuminati, like, whatever word you want to use, like, that's, like, kind of the cult. There are people who are more deliberate in their understanding and their execution of these, like, ideas and this philosophy and these feelings and all that shit. And then you have, like, the lost, the people that you encounter usually day to day who are kind of just, like, it's like Dr. Evil, like, mini-me. Like, they're just, like, little mini versions of, people call it externalization of the hierarchy. That's like the term that's been slapped onto that, where you have these like conspiratorial like ruling class that have essentially injected their ideology on some level into the people of the world. And they've done this obviously through, like we talked about, the intentional like spreading of like fear and anxiety and shit like that. But also like another angle is like in the music, like putting detrimental shit in the music or in movies and stuff. Like that's a more obvious example. And I actually really think the conspiratorial like manipulation, messing with like the fall of Hollywood and like the propaganda in there is actually like really sinister when you think about it, because if you think about like what I've been saying about stories and like what this guy and what that interview and stuff, like the importance it's placing on myths and like what they represent, it's almost like they're Alex Jones said this a million years ago. I have it on tape somewhere. It's an interview he did like 10 years ago or something. He's like, they're trying to create a fake archetypal imprint. And it's like, that's a very like interesting way of putting it. It's like, it adds a new layer of like sinister or like nefarious nature to the propaganda that's in movies, because we obviously understand it. It's like movies and storytelling is like sacred, and when you're like purposely kind of like hijacking that and manipulating it in the attempt to like mind control people or influence them, there's something like especially kind of wicked about that, you know. The Hollywood thing is definitely, it's almost worse than politics. It probably not necessarily Hollywood, but like the cultural aspects are almost worse than the political aspect. Again, you wouldn't understand this, that you would just put on the song, you would just play the music, you know, you would just put on the new Sexy Red song or whatever, and you just don't understand this stuff. They're ignorant people. They don't understand what they're doing. You know, I have a video of Little Uzi Vert, for example, and I don't hate this guy, but I made a video on this forever ago on my old channel, but it's a very telling moment. He's about to play that song, and it's like, all my friends are dead, which is it's an accurate thematic concept for the song. It's ironic that that's like conceptually what's going on in the song. It's a certain energy that he's using in his music. It has a lot of overlap with what happens in this moment. And my point is, what happens in this moment, he says to his fans, because he's like, you're all going to hell with me. He tells his fans, you're all going to hell with me. And people are like the mask kind of slipped there. You know, more normally people are like okay with just listening to the music. They don't understand what they're participating in. But when he says it like that overtly, people kind of have a little bit of pullback, because they're like, I don't know about that one, Uzi. Like, I don't know if I want to go to hell with you. And little Uzi Vert says, oh, you guys don't like that or something? Well, you heard the song a million times and you didn't even know. That's what he says to them. What does that mean? Well, it means, and it's funny because some of them are stupid. Some of them are probably just like plants by the industry and like bots, and they don't know what they're doing. But the fact that Uzi said that proves he understands this shit on a deeper level, which almost makes it worse. It's like, what's worse, wrongdoing that's done intentionally and consciously, or wrongdoing that's done? I mean, my point is, when he says you heard the song a million times and you didn't even know, he's saying you're participating in something that you don't even understand by liking this song and dancing along to it and resonating with it and singing along to it. And that's accurate. And I'm telling you, and why is Little Uzi Vert allowed to be successful? And I'm not saying he didn't work hard or make a catchy song, but on some level, I kind of believe the conspiratorial angle that like you're only, I don't know, maybe that's harsh, but it's like, I'm not trying to call people's success illegitimate, but on some level it seems like you're only allowed to exist at a certain level if the system co-signs you and allows you to. You know, just think about people who've been deplatformed from everything and stuff. It's like there's some level of, you can go far. That's like, I don't want to put that out there. Like, I think you can go far, but on some level, this system like co-signed him and wanted him to put that stuff out, and he understands what he's putting out. So this is just what I was talking about earlier, where it's like that moment where, you know, the protagonist right there, which is who you play as, he kind of the powerful emotions of all your friends and loved ones are flowing into your heart. Like, he becomes the incarnation of hope that can defeat Nyx and restore the seal. So it's just like one of those like beat him with friendship type anime moments. I don't need to play that. If you read this stuff, if you really want to get into it, which I don't want to waste any more of your guys' time, it's like everyone else is scared but not me. You showed me how to be tough. Like, it just shows like, again, the gravity, the depth of like the things that you can do, having like how that other guy put it, you know, living a life that could be inspirational to others and stuff.
Don't expect to walk out of here in one piece. We are going to make you understand. One must take full responsibility for their actions.
You know, this is from Persona 5, and I always thought it was interesting. I mean, I don't know every Persona game. I've only played these two, and I've like studied Persona 4 a little bit. if they remake it like they did with 3, I will probably play it. I mean, I could play it now, but I don't know. There are also big time commitments. Like, you want to get through a Persona game, you're looking at like 80 hours minimum. You want to like cover all bases, do everything, max out all your relationships and stuff. It's like 100-hour playthrough. But a lot of them start out with, I think, you signing your name, like a form of a complicit thing or like consent. And I think it's just interesting how he frames that. You know, we're going to make you understand that one must take full responsibility for their actions. That's true. And it's in a thing that you should probably come to understand. And it's not just about like accountability. It's not just about like blame and like, oh, fault and stuff like that. It's about, again, responsibility, meaning like what you do matters. So what you do is impactful, so you should care about what you do.
That monster isn't a shadow. It's the accumulated malice that came from the hearts of countless living people. All of them, deep down, are calling Nyx.
That can't be.
Last December, I too wished to learn death. It's probably true that people in town are wishing to touch it somewhere in their hearts.
I think I understand. When your life loses its meaning, the fact of death can be kind of comforting. That lurking malice we're unaware of is strong enough to give birth to such a huge monster. And maybe that's just how it is these days.
In this case, they're talking about like literal, I think they're talking about literally wishing for a literal death. And as we talked about, death can be conceptually more broad than literally just physical death. But she said something about like death being like comforting in a sense. And I can understand that to some extent. Like there's a reason that expression, like a fate worse than death, exists. Like, oh, would you rather be killed or like tortured for 10 years straight? It's like, I'd probably rather be killed. It's interesting to think about death as a savior. Right? It's like the Antichrist. It's like the Black Sun. It's like an anti-hero, but it's like a misguided hero or something like that. For example, in Star Wars, when Obi-Wan and Anakin fight, the song that plays in the background in Revenge of the Sith, it's called Battle of the Heroes, plural. So it's calling both of them a hero, which is not an accident. They don't name things like that on accident. Flying Lotus, the producer, Captain Murphy is like his rap name, but he's definitely way more well known as Flying Lotus. He just made a movie with Aaron Paul, and it was like a sci-fi movie, and I kind of wanted to check it out. Never saw it, but he has a song called Kronos the Terminator, which is Saturn. So Kronos the Terminator, and the hook goes something like "Everyone wants to be saved" or something like that. Like Kronos is killing people, and he's framing it as like a savior thing, which is interesting. I haven't heard the song in a while. I don't really know what he was trying to get across with the music video. I think someone's in their deathbed, like sick or something like that, and maybe that's kind of like what he's going for, like being that sick. Like when your quality of life goes way down, death could seem like a release and stuff. I don't know.
I am merely a harbinger of the fall. Although Nyx and myself are now one and the same.
Is that so? Well, regardless, I don't regret my decision. I'll defeat you no matter what you are.
I see. Then you must already know. What people fear most, what they try to ignore, that is what I am.
So that's an interesting point because obviously he's Nyx, she, I guess, is symbolic of death, or not even really symbolic at this point. It's like death incarnate. And obviously death is like a scary thing conceptually that we try to like put in the back of our minds and not really think about the inevitability of it all. But, you know, tied into this Saturn symbolism is themes of escapism in general. And that's obviously not limited to just like, it's funny how death and escapism, they're part of the same idea. It's not that every form of escapism that people participate in their day-to-day lives, like scrolling their cell phone or playing a video game or watching television, all these different ways people cope. It's not like they're doing it all to avoid thinking about death. I mean, there's like a million other tinier motivations for why people participate in escapism. But I just want you to know that escapism, like the Matrix and all these like things, and death are conceptually part of the same archetype. Like I have an Xbox over there, right? And I showed you earlier in this video, and I even said to you that the Xbox isn't called an Xbox for no reason. The X on it has to do with Saturn, and I wholeheartedly believe that. There's plenty of game studios like the Unity engine or what have you, whether it's an engine or a development studio or the name of a console, they kind of know what they're doing. And obviously, and I'm not saying it's like you're a bad person if you play video games. I get, like, they're cool. This literally is a video game that we're looking at, but it's just obviously they have this potential to be addictive. Obviously they have this, I'm sure if you've been like a gamer in your life, you know that you've like used it, if you're honest with yourself, like as a form of escapism. Yeah, I just think that's important to keep in your mind.
You are what awaits all living things from the moment they are born.
I've talked about this before in the context of Berserk, where we talk about fate being like a obstacle, like framing fate as like an obstacle. It's like Majora's Mask, like you've met with a terrible fate. And it's funny because I'm the thing that awaits all living things when they're born. You know, the mask salesman in that game also says something like, whenever there's a meeting, a parting is sure to follow. So even if you have like the best friendship, the best wife, the best whatever, if, you know, one thing doesn't break it up, at the end of it, something's going to break it up, and that's death, obviously. And no wonder that death conceptually has this overlap, like symbolically has this overlap with futility and nihilism and cynicism and stuff like that. I talked about it in terms of Berserk, which is funny. There's also the Black Sun, the solar eclipse, which is Saturn, in my opinion, the God Hand. They are kind of representatives of causality and fate. And the main character in that, if you don't know what Berserk is, I'm trying to speak like in loose terms so you understand what I'm saying. But the whole like premise, one of the major, I don't want to say the whole premise, but one of the themes in that series or franchise or whatever is rebelling against fate. And I think a lot of people, when they think about fate and destiny, they think of it as a good thing, like, oh, it's my destiny to be great. And it's like, that's not bad. It's not a bad way of thinking, but I just think it's an interesting it's at the very least interesting to think about a fate that's been set before you, you know, in terms of like real life. You think about like you're born into a world with a certain system, and these people have this dream. You're like existing in the dreams of other people that you'll like never even know or meet, and some of them might even be dead. And it's almost like, you know, the world wants to make you a certain way, and it's kind of like your fate has been set for you, and you kind of have to rebel against that a little bit. I think that's an interesting twist or take on the concept of fate.
But it's no use carrying on about it. I want to live.
The whole I want to live thing. I don't really watch One Piece, but that's another thing when I hate to like see, I'm all over the place, but it's like it's certain themes that show up over and over again. You know, guys, like One Piece, I don't even watch that show, but I know this scene, and I can feel it without even really knowing the characters. I watched One Piece when I was like a child, so like really early on stuff, when it was on like Adult Swim or Cartoon Network or whatever, and they had that like rap song intro. It was like really like forever ago stuff. There's a character in the show named Robin, I'm pretty sure is her name, and I don't really know why she has this psychology, but like she has this thing where she doesn't want to live, and Luffy, being like the hero, he gets the crew, like the group of friends, and they go to rescue her. And you know, Luffy says to her like, we'll save you if you just say it. And he just wants her to say like, I want to live. And it's funny because like, more over than just that declaration being like, I mean, in this case, it's probably literally life and death. It's not like an abstraction, but that declaration is like really powerful. And it's interesting in that scene, you know, there's an organization in One Piece, from what I understand, known as like the World Government. It's literally called World Government or something like that, which obviously conjures up images of like the New World Order and all this stuff. They, you know, Luffy shoots the flag that says World Government when they go to like rescue Robin. It's just like an interesting moment. And that might not make sense to you, but in my opinion, this whole like Saturn, like a world government is a consequence of like a Saturn ideology, if that makes sense. Like the trajectory that we're on right now in the world today is the consequence of like a Saturn ideology and like a Saturn heart, if that makes sense. That probably sounds a little dumb, but I don't know how else to say it. In regards to the last clip, when they talked about like avoiding the confrontation, avoiding the thinking of death, and in this case, I mean death like literally. You know, I know that's one of the things in Brave New World. I haven't read the book, but I've read like quotes from him and chapters from it, and I've watched a movie on it forever ago. But there's a scene in the movie, which I'm sure is in the book as well, where they have this like very sterile version of death where it's like all emotional weight and impact has been removed from it. It's like a weird obviously the motivations behind that are good. You'd have to watch the scene because they want people to not, I don't know, grieve and like be sad. But it's a form of like escapism where, yeah, I don't know how else to put it. I'm going just off memory of like an old thing that I haven't even seen in forever. They make it a very sterile experience, and it's like dehumanized in a lot of ways. So we're in Persona 5 now. We're not talking about Persona 3, but obviously the final bosses are, this is the final boss of Persona 5. Very similar in theme. He's more about like order and stuff like that. But again, it's all Saturn stuff. It's like, you know, I don't have the quote in here, but one of the things he says, and again, I never personally played, I did play this game, I didn't finish it. And everything I talk about on this channel, I'm not super intimately involved. Just as a little side note, like I'm not super intimately involved with every piece of media that I'm analyzing. Sometimes I skim them and look for certain themes and talk about it. There's some things that you get from being intimately involved with it, like certain quotes and stuff that people won't. My point is that you're missing out on things if you don't personally like read everything in the book or play the entire game or watch the entire movie. But you don't have to develop like a general understanding and to pick up on like themes and archetypes. You just kind of need to see a few scenes and hear a few lines. But obviously your understanding isn't going to be as deep as if you spent all the time with that piece of media. Obviously, I'm not going to do that for every single thing that I talk about. My point is, I don't have the quote, but one of the things he says is something like, not even a single sliver of unpredictability can be tolerated, or something like that. And it's very like mechanical, very tyrannical and orderly. A lot of themes of like freedom and order. And again, guys, I've already made this point a million times on this channel. Like tyranny and death symbolically are joined at the hip. I don't mean just because like a tyrant's gonna kill everybody, but we already talked about how death is a bigger thing conceptually than just, oh, like physical people dying. You think about like the cynicism and the inevitability and the futility that kind of comes with this like death mindset, the despair. And then there's a lot of overlap with how a tyrant would think, obviously, because a tyrant obviously believes in like the irredeemability of man. I have to coerce, intimidate, force. And this is if you're making the tyrant be like a good guy. I mean, some of them probably just want power and money or something like asinine like that. It's deeper than that. And it's like you can't be trusted with your own freedom. And that's obviously a condemnation of character. Like it's a cynical view of humanity, which you see that overlap with the death stuff, which is why Saturn is all of these things at the same time. I hope that makes sense. So what I'm saying is there's not like a real huge meaningful difference between this final boss in Persona 5 and the final boss in Persona 3. They're just like different points of attention, I guess, on the same overall archetype. It's like a different iteration of the same idea. It's not really like universes apart.
Administrator born of the collective human unconscious. The god of control, Youndabout.
This is crazy! It's like a building! It was already huge back when it was the Holy Grail!
I don't really know what to make of that Holy Grail thing.
The administrator must guide mankind toward proper development.
Right, that's another thing, right? You know, I could go on a whole rant about like the stuff that is considered progress, the things that we do for the sake of progress. It's kind of like this whole AI shit right now. It's like, I contest what that word even means, because the earth is for human beings, and it's like if the quality of life isn't improving for us as like an experience, and we're just building things because we can, because that's just seems like the next technological step, and we call that progress, but we're actually suffering from it. Is it truly progress? You know what I mean? Progress towards what? And progress for who? And I think it's like non-human things, but and that's kind of the point. It's like thing about transhumanism, right? Like, well, what does that mean? It means to like be, what do you think about like a transition from a human? If you ever wanted to be immortal, essentially, not that I want to get too deep into that, but you have to become something that isn't human. And as long, I mean, that's fine, but you're not an immortal human. You're not a human anymore. You're something else. That might be progress. I don't know.
The foolishness of man has been proven. It is the administrator's duty to purge them.
You kidding? This is just some kind of rigged game you started.
The foolish masters merely spread indolent thoughts and force the progress of society.
I didn't even know he was gonna say this shit, and I haven't watched these things in a long time. I'm kind of reacting to this for the first time.
The world would slowly meet its demise.
Right. Again, if we trusted human beings with freedom, they would destroy themselves. And again, this is why I place so much importance on you, the viewer, and me, myself, and like, not who you vote for and like this Illuminati bloodline or whatever the fuck. It's just like, or this group of people or whatever. It's like what you do, you personally, and like what you think and what you feel and how you act is like actual evidence for like what spiritual philosophical claim is right. Like you're either proving the devil's point or you're proving God's point with how you act. Obviously that applies like immense responsibility and pressure onto the consequence and weight of your actions, and your not even just your actions though, but like literally like the feelings that you feel that no one else can see. That's a really tall order. I understand. I think even reforming the shit that like people don't even know, like the reason why you do things, the intention behind why you do things, like trying to make those as pure as possible, I think actually does matter. So my point is, in this specific scenario, if you're given freedom, all you do with it is like, I don't know, hurt other people or goon and play video games and waste it. If you squander your potential, it's kind of just like a blank check. You know what I mean? Freedom, this is a classic way of framing it. It's not just life and death, right? Or hope and despair, or redemption and condemnation. It's like freedom and oppression, right? That's another way of thinking about it. It's one of the classic things people talk about with God. A lot of people conceptually don't like the idea of a literal God because there's bad things on earth, and obviously some of those are it's pretty hard to argue the case that some of the suffering on earth, a good portion of it, isn't just apparently random, senseless, undeserved, meaningless suffering, which is like very hard to like wrestle with. But a lot of it is self-inflicted. I would argue the majority of it is self-inflicted, and a lot of the random suffering could be remedied better if the self-inflicted suffering wasn't going on. And what I mean by that, for example, is if humanity like had its act together, morally speaking, there would be less people like dying from diseases and shit like that, for example, like things that are random. But a lot of it's self-inflicted, and a lot of that comes from, I don't know, just what people choose to do. And my point about the free will thing is, if God made everyone act correctly, if he waved his God hand and made you become a good person, you wouldn't actually be good because you didn't choose it. So there's no merit or value or victory in the goodness then, because it's just like this. It's force, it's coercion, and that's kind of what some people want from God, and it doesn't seem appropriate. I don't know. I hope that makes sense.
That doesn't mean humans are evil, though.
Indeed, there are many upstanding citizens. However, they merely take the soul path before them. The act of making decisions is accompanied by nothing but pain. Even if a cliff of ruin lie ahead, these lemmings would march on without a second thought.
Okay, well, that's another interesting perspective, I guess. He's not saying these people are like inherently consciously choosing evil. They're so programmable in a way that whatever's just before them, whatever's easiest, they're gonna choose that, which there's a lot of truth to that. So I guess in his mind, if he creates, he might as well be the one to create a program for people to carry out. And I think he is just trying to kill everybody, though. I don't know what his goal is.
If this is all for the sake of humanity, wouldn't being beaten by humans satisfy you?
That's actually a good question.
I am the entity which governs this world. Its future depends wholly on my leadership.
You know, and I've seen that idea. I hate referencing other anime because it's like people don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But it's like in Yu Yu Hakusho, it's an old anime from like the 90s, you know, like Spirit Gun. It's Yusuke Urameshi. He's wearing that like green outfit. Everyone knows the Dark Tournament arc and stuff. There's a scene where the final battle of the Dark Tournament, Yusuke fights, I forget his name, and I have the clips. I don't know if I can even go over it because of copyright. I'll try to at some point. But Yusuke, let's just say the hero fights the villain, and this villain has this very like cynical view about like friendship and believes in his own power and yada yada yada. And maybe he has a backstory of suffering to some extent. I don't know. He literally deep down wants Yusuke to beat him. He wants the hero's stance to be actually correct, even though he can't believe in it because of like what he's seen or what he's done or whatever. And in that sense, he's more of like a tragic hero, or like I don't mind using the word villain. People hate when you use the word villain because they're like, well, you don't understand like all these nuances. It's like, to me, when I say villain, it already incorporates all those nuances that you're already considering. So I just think your understanding of the word needs to be broadened. I don't think I need to use a different word. But yeah, obviously he's like more of a nuanced villain. So I've seen that like theme pop up a few times. I mean, to apply that into real life, but then beyond that, there's other villains who are just like, they're more like forces of nature or symbolic of something more pure evil, and there's not like a human suffering, like redeemable quality to them. Like think Vader or Palpatine kind of thing, like Vader versus Palpatine kind of thing. But yeah, if you apply that to like real life, you know, if you believe in like a lot of the conspiratorial claims and about the path that we're on, and it seems like we're moving towards like a tyranny and things like that, if they do believe that they're doing it for the sake of people, I would imagine, at least some of them, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. So on some level, it's almost like, you know how we were talking about sometimes they leave from a conspiracy. I don't know how like conspiracy oriented you guys are, but it's like sometimes there's phenomenon where it's like certain breadcrumbs, like pieces of evidence, will be left behind almost so brazenly, like they want you to find it, right? There's a bunch of different explanations for this. One of the explanations is like, hey, we're gonna do things that are so obvious and we're gonna tell you about it, and if you don't respond, then it's your own fault and it's not our fault. So that's one explanation. There might be like a spiritual component to that. Another explanation is like demoralization and intimidation. It's like, hey, this piece of evidence is here. It's so obvious that we're lying to you, and it's so obvious we're doing these bad things. And the people that notice it are going to be intimidated because it just comes off as so brazen, and they know you're not going to do anything about it. And then that's obviously like demoralizing. It's like, oh, I can't do anything about it. But here's another interesting idea. I never thought about it in that context, which is why I'm even rehashing this topic. It's like maybe one of the variables, one of the explanations is they do it because they want people to see it and they want people to stop them. That would be interesting, to say the least. I can't prove that. Obviously, this is all like crazy speculation about like some really out there stuff, but that's an interesting idea. I've never heard anybody say that to explain that kind of phenomenon, like, oh, the passports on, we found the passport on 9/11, telling us who's responsible, or like, you know, just like those little things that are so like nutball, like crazy, that it makes there's like no way that they actually expect you to believe it. Or when like, I don't need to give you examples. I hope you guys get what I'm saying. I just thought that was interesting to think, because I've been thinking about that a lot lately with the Epstein file, like emails being released. Okay, so a corrupt system somewhat willingly exposing itself, even if like they're not like releasing all the files, and it seems like they're trying to cover them up. It also, to me, it all comes off like strategy. I know that's not like a fun perspective, just to say it's another layer of a conspiracy. I know we want to look at these emails and be like, oh my God, did you see that? And it's like, maybe that stuff is true, but it's like, we're being shown this stuff on purpose. They're not, it's not like a leak. It's not a accident. They're doing it on purpose. And obviously, my point is, I've just been thinking about this stuff a lot lately, this topic a lot.
My word.
Why is everything...
The whole world is a product of cognition, not just the metaverse. It can be freely remade. The same goes for you and everyone else.
Dude, Mona!
Mona-chan, this can't be happening!
Soon a new world will come. One where mankind isn't held captive. The world will shine brightly as long as you hold hope in your hearts.
What's going to happen to you?
Again, it's just that theme we've already talked about. We already talked about it with Persona 3 in regards to, like, okay, in mass people take on this death mindset, and it leads to the dissolving of hope was like a literal, like, hope was like a literal spiritual barrier that was created that kept, like, demons and shadows and death incarnate at bay. Well, once people were filled with despair, those things were allowed to seep in. Like, so that feeling, their cognition, created the circumstances. And I mean, I don't know how absolute that is. Like, I mean, if I wanted to be like silly with it, it's like, okay, if every human being believed that we could fly, like if everyone on Earth right now just believed, oh, human beings can fly, like without wings and shit like that. Like right now I could just get up and jump out my window and fly. If everyone believed that, would it make it true? It's like, I don't know. But it's still, in principle, this is like a very good and useful and probably true in many other ways kind of idea.
Remember, there's no such thing as the real world. What each person sees and feels, those are what shape reality.
It's true. True.
This is what gives the world infinite potential. Even if you feel that only darkness lies ahead, as long as you hold hands together, see it through as one, the world will never end. The world exists within all of you.
Anyways, guys, there's nothing. I have a few more clips, but it's kind of redundant. I'm going to end it here. Thank you guys for hearing me out. Thank you for watching if you stuck this far, and let me know what you think.